Good afternoon and welcome to Content Chat. I'm your host, Erica Heald, and today we're having another one of our summer shorts because although summer is almost over, it's not quite there. So we're having another one of our nice, quick tips from me to you to help you create a more effective and efficient content marketing program. So today we're going to be talking about something that I actually had a conversation about with one of my peers very, very recently. And that is, what exactly does a website content refresh entail? And the thing is, of course, if you ask 3 different people to tell you what is included in a content refresh, you're going to end up with 3 incredibly different answers. Of course, many of the organizations where I worked, when we were doing a new website or doing, what they were calling a content refresh, it would frequently be a very significant, several months long, lots of people involved project where you'd really be creating something from the ground up. But that's not necessarily always what it needs to be or what somebody has in mind when they say they need to do a content refresh. So I'm going to walk you through the 3 basic types of content refreshes I've been doing for clients for their websites over the past 5 years. So that way you can get a better idea of what those different projects look like so that if you're planning to do some updating to your website next year, that you can think about your options and how that might fit into the timeline that you envision or the amount of budget you have or internal resources that you have for doing your website content update. So the easiest and most common refresh that I do is where we basically take another look at the content on the website and identify where there are things missing from an SEO and generative AI standpoint. So that's looking for, having specific descriptive title tags, having a meta description versus just letting the meta description be pulled from the first copy on the page, having pages that interlink, just understanding some of those basic things about your site and finding ways to update it. In those situations, we frequently end up writing meta descriptions for maybe the top 30 or 40 pages and giving a template that the team can use for creating the content for those other pages. This is the kind of project that Alec and I turn around in usually about a month. And if it takes longer, it's usually because we're still trying to figure out from the client what the right keywords are for their project. In those situations, we are, of course, happy to go in and do that themselves, but it's always best when you're working from that list from your clients, so that way you're aware of who they're trying to reach and what type of content they're expecting to find on this website. So that kind of a project is going to take 20 to 30 hours. It's something that easily can be turned around as part of your internal team's regular workflow over the course of a month, or that you can outsource it to someone else and have it, even with the back and forth required for meetings and reviews, you can easily get this kind of project done in a month. So that's your basic level, low-hanging fruit kind of a give your website a refresh. And that's, again, the kind of project that I work on most frequently, because if you've spent a lot of time creating your content, a lot of times you just need a little bit of optimization. You just need somebody to come in who doesn't have any emotional attachment to that content, who can let you know how you might be able to structure it better in order to accommodate the people coming to your site. Now, the second kind of a project, which I have a tendency to do a few of every year, are where we start by doing an audit and look at all of the analytics for a website and actually make sure that all of that's mapped to the pages on the site, and taking a look at the content and seeing where it can be improved from a user standpoint. Are there issues with navigation? Is there content that's buried 4, 5, 6 clicks in? And for those of you having heart failure right now, it does happen, and it's very, very fixable. We also have a tendency in these kinds of projects to be doing this for sites where they've evolved organically over time with people kind of adding things on, and they're not even sure what all the content is that they have. that they can be pulling from and repurposing. So in these projects, we're going through and we're assessing every single page that's received any kind of traffic over the past year. So frequently this is a couple hundred pages, going through, adding them to a content inventory sheet and doing auditing, where we're looking at the content and saying, is this content outdated? Is this content really light? Could it be combined with other content to create a better experience for the person coming to this page? So of course, we're still doing the SEO and generative AI optimizations at the same time, but it's really just, all about enhancing that user experience. We're optimizing existing content in order to help that website do a better job. Usually we also help by creating governance tools, because of course, if you've been around Content Chat for a while, you've heard me talking about all sorts of elements of those fundamental building blocks of content governance that really help you maintain that consistency and make sure you don't forget things moving forward, like to include all of those SEO details and mapping out your keywords and making sure that you think through other pages that you can link to instead of repurposing their content and having duplicate content. And then, of course, we always do provide awards, we always do provide recommendations for the ways you can incorporate either things you've told us about that are coming up for you, or things that we know that your peers have on their websites, or that we've seen clients really adding to their websites, to give you some ideas for what you might want to plan for in the future. Now, these kinds of projects are usually going to be several hundred hours, so 200 to 300 hours if you're actually going to have us come in and do that level of an audit where we're looking at that content, we're evaluating it, and then creating derivative content, taking the content you have and creating better web content for you. That sort of a project with that amount of hours has a tendency to take usually about 4 months with all of the back and forth. Those kinds of projects Alec and I usually partner on, so that way we can get things done a little bit more quickly than if it was just one of us trying to get through it. So that's kind of your intermediate, medium level of effort, where if you have a bunch of content on your site and it can be a little bit better, it's not organized so great, having somebody come in and do that kind of content refresh and update is very, very helpful. And it's not as time consuming or as expensive as throwing it all out and starting from scratch. I tend to do only one of those kinds of big website projects per year, because when you compare it to the other two, it's just a completely different process. Because realistically, you have to have a deep understanding of the brand and its differentiators and who it's trying to reach before you even think about creating any content at all. And then for each individual page, the client that you're working for, whoever is the owner of that brand, for every single page needs to be reinforcing who the audience is for that specific page, because it might not be the same on every page, because you are going to have specific buyers for specific products or services. So, really doing that deep dive into who the person is that you're writing this content for. And part of that is having that understanding of what the primary needs and pain points are that these people have that this product or service solves for. So that way you can really get in there, have that empathy for the problem that they are experiencing, and help them actually take care of that product, take care of that problem with your product. And of course, you want to make sure that you're not guessing, but that whoever is the owner of the product tells you what is the main takeaway. What does the person who comes to this page need to understand? And what's the action you want them to take? So that's just the baseline level of background information that I always receive in order to start even outlining a page. And if I have a really great client, then I receive, all of those things that I otherwise have to follow up and ask about what's the single job this page needs to accomplish. Is this a parent page or a child page? How does it fit into the context of the other web pages? So that way I know how deep I should be going with this content, or if I'm going to be creating a page later that does a deeper dive on a specific component. And last but not least, what are the key messaging points that you want to make sure are reflected in this content? And I have to say, this is frequently one of the big sticking points in some of the projects that I've seen folks try to scope out. If you're in the situation where your messaging has not been defined or your branding is in flux, or you're not really sure which keywords you can commit to actually owning because you haven't figured out your differentiators, then you really can't start on one of these projects where you are from scratch creating all of the content to do its best job. You can certainly create some content, but if you don't have that clarity around who the brand is, what makes it different, who your customers are, and what your messaging is, you're probably going to be doing a little bit of a content refresh pretty quickly after launching that website. Because if you're in progress with doing those things while you're also in the progress of creating a website, it's just not going to end up reflecting where you're going. Because even the best writers who try to anticipate your needs, we're actually not mind readers. It just sometimes feels that way when we have a really good rapport. So I hope as you are taking a look at your planning for next year and figuring out what kind of updates you should be doing to your website, I hope this gives you a little bit of context so that way you can figure out the right kind of website content update for your organization and where you are in your brand journey. And that way you can get those bids from folks to help you or figuring out how to incorporate it into your existing resources without driving somebody absolutely into burnout, because we don't need any more marketing burnout, right? Okay. There's not going to be a content chat next week, by the way, because I'm going to be in Cleveland. That's right. It's CEX, the content, I always, the Creator Economy. I keep wanting to call it by its old name, the Creator Economy Expo in Cleveland. So I'm going to be there soaking up all sorts of things about the business of content. And I hope that I will see you there. Take care.